Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Julian, I think after you've gone through this, it's not all that bad.
I'll wait to hear yourself.
Yes. What Colonel Karandeep had covered was basically to do with Ministry of Home Affairs, and I'm going to totally concentrate on Ministry of Defence. That is the defence projects which are there in the pipeline, and how does India go about procuring this stuff. I'll be covering my talk basically following heads. Moving on, you need to get a small overview on how big is our budget and what are the numbers we are talking about. You see that since 2009, defense budget has gone up in billions of dollars. The last allocation in 2013-14, that is this year, is about 40 billion USD, 40.7 billion USD. The share of GDP generally been sticking around about 2%. This year it's come down, but if in money terms you see, it's gone up. In GDP terms, it's come down to about 1.79, but overall it's gone up to about 40.7 billion USD. The complete defense budget is divided into two portions. One is capital acquisition and one is revenue acquisition. Capital acquisition is the one which is in red. That is basically for buying all the major equipment for the Ministry of Defence. And the revenue expenditure is basically looking towards your day-to-day expenditure. That is running of the three armed forces. This is the further split up of the 40.73 billion USD which has been allocated to the defense budget. You see, along with the three armed forces, Army, Air Force and Navy, there is allocation which goes towards DRDO, OFB. OFB is Ordnance Factory Boards, and some other miscellaneous organizations which are associated with the armed forces. If you see the major chunk I've given you a trend of the last 2 years, that is the last year and this year, the majority goes towards Army, and the rest is split between rest everybody. Army, Air Force, Navy, and thereon. 20th of April this year, we had a new defense procurement procedure which was promulgated, that is known as DPP 2013. I'll just take you through the timelines as to how this has evolved to 2013. The initial orders were issued by Ministry of Defence in 2001, wherein defence sector was open to private industry, and 26% of FDI was permitted. This 26% of FDI still holds and is being hotly debated, likely to be increased to about 49%. That's what is the private industry pushing for. 2002, you had something known as a Defence Acquisition Council which was created, and a category known as buy was introduced. 2003, you had another category which was introduced, buy and make. Now the difference between buy and make is that in buy you went and bought whatever you wanted to. In buy and make, you bought X amount of the total equipment ordered, you went and bought it straightforward, and the remaining was to be made in India. So that's why it became buy and make. This was basically to bring about indigenization in the defense sector in India, which was not happening till then. 2004, there was a committee which was instituted known as the Kelkers Committee to revise all these procedures and to have a look at the private sector participation as to how they can participate towards bringing about a bigger change into this organization. 2005 to 2009, various amendments took place. You had a new DPP coming out at the end of 2009, which had the offset policy included, and an organization known as DOFA, Defense Offset Facilitation Agency, which was created. Now it has been renamed as DOMW. Now, this was basically to look after the offset obligations, and you had another category introduced, that was make and buy and make Indian. Now, you see there were first you had a category buy, that was just go and buy it from anywhere. Then you had buy and make. Then you had make and buy and make Indian. That means it had to be made by an Indian company which was nominated by Government of India. This was to boost the DRDO and give the defense public sector undertakings opportunity to participate in the defense programs. 2011, offset was introduced, this was enhanced to include aerospace and internal security, which were not part of offset obligations. Now what you mean here is that in offset, MRO facilities which were created in India, that is maintenance, refit and overall facilities which were created in India, could be taken against your offset obligation credits, which was not earlier permitted. 2012, there were revised offset guidelines which were issued, wherein TOT was included also as list of offsets. Now till now, I'll cover offsets in greater details later on, but till now, TOT was not counted as a part of offsets. So if you did TOT, you didn't get any benefit out of it. You had a restriction on FDI to 26%. To top it, that Indian government nominated a company with whom you'll do a tie-up for buy and make, and TOT did not get you any brownie points in the whole tendering process. Here, you see a slight gradual change coming in. You had TOT included, and there were more credits being given for doing tie-ups with smaller organizations. 20th April, which I mentioned in 2013, now the major change has taken place, and which you all need to be aware of, is that a category known as Buy Indian, that means the first preference will be given for any defense acquisition happening in India to an Indian company. So let's say I was from the Navy. If I had to put up a proposal to the Ministry of Defense, the first thing I have to do is I have to rule out that I cannot buy this stuff from India. Once I rule out that possibility, and I can say that none of the defense PSUs or the private industry is capable of manufacturing this equipment, I go on to the next category, that is buy and make Indian. That means a foreign company comes in with a JV with the Indian company and makes it in India. Now once I rule out that possibility that there is nobody who is interested in coming to India and making it, can I go to a buy global tender? So it makes more sense for any company entering into India to have an Indian partner so as to be able to participate in tendering. That is 2013 onwards. Till now, whatever has been issued, this does not stand for those tenders. Whatever will be issued now onwards, this has to be taken in consideration for that. Another very interesting thing, which Colonel Karandeep had brought out earlier, the policy, that is the long-term integrated perspective plan, that means what Army, Air Force and Navy have planned over the next 15 to 20 years, was never known to us. The new DPP has said that the LTIPP, less confidential version of the whole thing, which is promulgated by the armed forces, will be given to the industry. So the industry can plan and bid for the tenders, get into association, joint ventures, whatever is required, and not run at the last minute to get into any kind of arrangements with the Indian company. So LTIPP becoming coming into the public domain is actually going to help a lot of industry, a lot of private defense industry to bid for the right tenders and be ready for them in advance. Just to explain the whole procedure now, how does this whole thing go about, the DPP which we have talked about. Now, everything is not, I just don't get up in the morning and say that I want to buy 100 guns. It does not happen that way. It's a very planned, and that's where I wanted to address the thing is that it is not that simple that MOD or can say tomorrow morning that I'm not interested in this tender or I don't want to buy it. You will see how it is deliberated at every step, and when a decision is arrived at, it is after a lot of procedure which has been gone into. Everything is planned as per LTIPP, that is long-term integrated prospective plan, which defines what the three services are going to buy over the next 15 years. And this is what I was telling is going to come into the public domain now. This is then translated into something known as a services capital acquisition plan, which defines in a shorter period, 5 years what am I going to buy. And this is further divided and comes into something known as an annual acquisition plan, which is for 1 year. Now, annual acquisition plan also has some committed liabilities. That means I have signed a contract this year, but I have not paid the complete amount. So that gets shifted to the next year. So that comes into the annual acquisition plan. The annual acquisition plan has the committed liabilities which are carried forward from the last year and whatever comes into it flowing from the LTIPP. So that's what is the AAP which consists of. Now, once I've gone through all this, I've made my AIPP at my service headquarters. I issue something known as a request for information. Here, it's very important for the companies to participate, because this is where it is decided whether this company is going to be part of the vendor list to whom the tender is going to be issued or not. This is where I will sit down, or the service headquarters will sit down and decide as to what are the qualitative requirements for the system which I am going to be. This is a very defining moment, and the industry abroad normally doesn't pay heed to this particular aspect, and then later on it becomes an issue. So it's very important that you become a part of the RFI so as to be part of the final tendering process. This RFI defines the SQRs, that is the staff qualitative requirements for the three forces. That means I tell that I want a ship which has an endurance of so many days, it does a speed of so and so many knots, the tonnage is full displacement is going to be so much, it's going to have this missile, this radar, everything is defined in this. So as to put and this is purely based on the response for RFI which I receive. After all this thing has happened, then there is something known as a statement of case, which is prepared by the service headquarters, wherein I give them this whole statement of case, is sent to various organizations like DRDO, Ministry of Defense, Department of Defense Production, and Ministry of Defense Finance, where it is deliberated on a file and their comments given, all their apprehensions are addressed, and thereafter the statement of case is approved. Now, once you've got the statement of case approved, do you send it to something known as HQIDS? Now, this step is being taken purely from the point of view is that Army, Air Force and Navy, there might be some joint requirements which are existing for all the three services. HQIDS is a nodal agency in India which combines all the requirements of all the three armed forces, puts in on a single platform if there are common requirements, and then goes forward. If it's a very Navy specific, Army specific or an Air Force specific requirement, then it goes ahead without that. Post all this thing happening, do you go in for something known as acceptance of necessity? Now, once a AON is awarded, it's the major step is the major portion of all the process is finished. Now, the committees which are involved in doing this is something known as a SCAP-CC. Now, this is where now we have the civil industry participation. That is the Chamber of Commerce coming in. They come in, they give in their inputs whether the private industry is ready to absorb this kind of a technology, what are the comments of the private industry for indigenization of this equipment. They put in their inputs at that stage. From here it goes to the higher committee, SCAP-CHC. From there it goes to something known as the Defense Procurement Board. This is chaired by the Defense Minister of India, and then the Defense Acquisition Council. This is where the final approval is given, acceptance of necessity. That means it is decided that yes, Indian Navy needs 4 more frigates. Once this is given, you go ahead with your next procedure. Now, this is where now we issue the RFP. You've got the AON, you've got the quantity vetted, everybody is given their inputs, all things have been ironed out, you issue the RFP. Post issuance of RFP, all defense tendering is a techno-commercial bid. That means the bid is submitted in 2 parts, technical and commercial. 2 separate envelopes, one carrying your technical specifications, one's carrying your commercial act. Ministry of Defense opens the technical proposals and undertakes something known as the field evaluation trials. The commercial are closed, they are not opened at this stage. Service headquarters does the technical evaluation, they form a proper team, they go across to various places. These are what was being mentioned as the NCNC trials. At this stage, are you coming at the NCNC trials? After you have been evaluated on paper, do you go in for field trials? After the TEC is approved, then what I was telling you is you go in for the field evaluation trials. After the field evaluation trials, it goes to MOD, who approves the whole thing, and then opens the commercial bid only for the people who have qualified the field evaluation trials. If you have not qualified your field evaluation trials, your commercials are not opened. They are destroyed without being opened. Only the commercials are open for the vendors or the companies who have qualified in their technical evaluation. Now, what we went through previously, the SCAP CEC, SCAP CHC, and DAC DPP, these are the various powers which have been allocated by Government of India. Decentralizing, that means SCAP CC, SCAP CHC, if there is a tender for 10 million, it does not go to DPP and DAC. It gets sorted out at the CHC level only. So these are the various sanctioning authorities. The lower half is for award of contracts. So if you see that 10 million USD can be awarded by service headquarters, they don't need to go to Ministry of Defense. Now, that was purely for the red portion of the graph which I showed you earlier, the capital acquisition. Now I move on to revenue, which is for day-to-day running. The normal time span which has been given as per books for DPP is almost between 2 to 3 years to finish the procedure which I had just told you all about. This is DPM, much faster, happens for revenue procurement, doesn't have to go through all the things which we had talked about initially. Under the new new management strategy, Indian government has decentralized the decision making in revenue because these are for day-to-day use. It was issued in 2009, presently under revision. We were expecting it sometime to come out this year early. Hopefully, before the end of this year, you'll have a new DPM in place. Like I mentioned to you, these are for maintenance and working expenses, renewals and replacements, assemblies, sub-assemblies to maintain and operate the already sanctioned assets. Majority, if you had seen the graph earlier, 60% of your allocation towards your service goes towards revenue. The remaining 40% goes towards capital acquisition. Procedure, very simple. You make your staff qualitative requirements, AON, quantity vetting, which is done at the service headquarters level. RFP is issued. You have 3 ways of issuing RFP, a 2-bid system where there are at least 2 people bidding for the tender. If there are not 2 people, what happens is, like I told you, renewal and replacements of old. So if it's a renewal or a replacement, there is somebody who already has a OEM status, do a single bid, issue it to him, he's the only guy who makes it, get a proposal for him and award the contract. And then there's something known as a PAC. If you are awarded a PAC certificate, then the tender is issued in your name and you submit your bids. This whole thing's just about 22 to 25 weeks to finish this whole procedure. Much faster, happens within the same financial year, and that's why the expenditure is almost 60%. Just a comparison between the 2 procedures which I had explained to you earlier. DPP is for capital, DPM is for revenue. Only done by service headquarters and Ministry of Defense, whereas revenue is even to the local authorities. Like in Navy, you have 3 commands, Mumbai, Cochin and Visakhapatnam. That means the 3 command headquarters can do their own procurement. They need not go to even Delhi to ask anybody. 2-bid system, techno-commercial bid. Here, it's a simple thing. You are a person, just get your bids and submit it and finish it off with. DPM, this is a very important point. Only OEMs can participate. That means the original equipment manufacturers can only bid. Whereas in DPM, you can have a representative sitting in India bidding for you on your behalf. Red light's on, so I need to go faster. Time duration is longer, here it is truncated. Defense offsets. We are the only country in the world who is asking for 30% as defense offsets. There are countries where 100% of offsets are asked for. Please take advantage of this fact that only 30% of offset obligations are required as per Indian law. Indicative cost is about that anything more than 300 CR, you have to go in for defense offset obligations, that is 30% of the contract value. The schemes which are categorized as BLIGE, Global and Buy and Make with TOT fall under the offset obligations. Value of offset is 30% like I mentioned for the 2 categories. Direct purchase of eligible products, which is there, the Indian offset partners. I think I'll run through them faster. All these things are the obligations which can be taken advantage of when you're going in for your offset obligations. Now, if you're in the Indian offset partner and you're doing a TOT, then you get 1.5 times your offset obligations. If your Indian offset partner is a medium or a small enterprise in India, manufacturing enterprise, then you get again 1.5 times the credit. So So that's the advantage which you have in offsets. TOT with DRDO is also counted towards the offset obligations. Here what I like to mention is that 70% of defense procurement is imported, only 30% is indigenous. Out of this 70%, 65% is towards DRDO. So DRDO is a very big player in this organization, in the offset obligations. Defense products which are eligible for offsets, name it and it's there. This is what I was mentioning earlier, which was included subsequently, which was not earlier a part of offset obligations. This is again addition which came in later on. OEM, this Buy Indian category which was there earlier. Buy Indian category which was there earlier, wherein the OEM was allowed, was nominated by Government of India. That is not happening anymore. Government of India has allowed the industry to come in and select their own partner, which was not there earlier. Earlier, a person was nominated by Government of India. That means a DPSC was nominated. When you had a Buy an Indian category, you were told Buy Indian Bharat Electronics Limited. That means you had to go to Bharat Electronics Limited, do your work share matrix, and then submit your tender. That's no more there. Now you can go and select, want to be with Tatas, Mahindras, L&T, Punch Lloyd, Bharat Forge, anybody. Just go select your partner and submit your bid. But natural, there's an agreement which is required between the two companies. Like I told you, the acquisition wing of MOD is responsible for your offset proposals. So they have to be approved by Ministry of Defence. Earlier, offset obligations were not taken into consideration when you were not part of your tendering process. But now, offset obligations, that means your Indian offset partners have to be nominated and the list has to be submitted along with your tender, which was not there earlier. So you need to be, before you bid, that's what I'm saying, how LTIPP comes, becoming a public domain becomes important is that you know that your product is going to be more than 300 crores. So therefore, you need to tie up with Indian offset partners to fulfill your offset obligations. So when you tender, there is no rush. Everything is in place before you actually go in for your tendering process. Now, there are penalties being laid down for not fulfilling your offset obligations. Earlier, this was not being implemented. Now we become very strict. If you have not fulfilled your offset obligations, you are going to get into trouble, or there is penalties which are going to be put in by Ministry of Defence. Just for your information, if you see, the complete MRO industry in Malaysia has come up purely because of the offset obligations which were enforced by the government. We are yet to enforce this offset obligations, but 2013, with the new policies coming in, it's going to be enforced in much rigorous way to ensure that it is taken in. What I had mentioned to you, DOFA is now known as Defence Offset Management Wing. It's just working under the Department of Defence Production, and they monitor your offset obligations very strictly. Yes. Yes, sorry. These are the major procurements which are in place going on for the Army. Some of the Air Force, the naval ones. These are what the AON has been accorded, which I told you in the thing. Thank you.